So we like to run these crash courses kind of on a tight schedule just because we finish pretty early. They're only 45 minutes. So I definitely want to make sure that we are getting the most out of this session tonight. So I'm going to start us off right away. It's 6 p.m. here in Minnesota and 7 p.m. on the East Coast. So that's our cue to get going, and we'll let those other participants trickle in kind of in these intro slides. So again, welcome to How to Take a Gap Year, the ultimate crash course, where you'll find our top tricks and resources for planning or executing your most successful gap year or gap time. So really quick, before we get started and dive into Holly's presentation and the Q&A, which is going to be the meat of our night, I did just want to bring forth a couple really great gap year resources. And before I even do that, don't worry, all these resources I'm going to drop into the chat so that you'll have them and you'll be able to copy and paste into your own document or your own notes. But I'll also be sending them out via email as well, either later tonight or tomorrow, so that you'll have them that way too. And then also a friendly reminder that this webinar is going to be recorded. So if you have to bump out early, no worries at all. You can always find a recording of this crash course on our YouTube channel tomorrow. And again, I'll be dropping a link to that YouTube channel as well. So first up on our resources, what I want to highlight is our Gap Year Hub, which is open 24/7 on Go Overseas. There you can find out all about our sponsored Gap Year programs, Gap Year consultants and counselors, and read verified alumni reviews. And I'll be getting to this also, but we just launched as of today our $5,000 2022 USA Gap Year Affairs Scholarship. So you'll be able to find all the information for that scholarship there on our website. And again, I'll drop a link to that. Next, please, if you haven't already, do join us at a fair. These crash courses are really amazing opportunities to kind of, increase your knowledge of all things gap year fairs and all things gap years. But at the fairs, you'll really be able to connect one-on-one with our program providers and answer any kind of specific questions that way. And then finally, this is one of my favorite resources of all, which is our Gap Matcher quiz. It's a super quick and easy survey where you can kind of input all of your interests and your goals, and then you'll come out with a really customized list of gap year programs based on you, based on your interests, based on your aspirations. So it's a great tool, and I really recommend taking this Gap Matcher quiz if you haven't done so already. Okay, and then just a reminder, we are in the ultimate crash course for your gap year. And I wanted to bring this to your attention that we have 2 crash courses left following this session, and they're both going to be very informative. The next one is going to be this Thursday on how to choose a gap year program. And then on March 10th, we'll be featuring a crash course on how to win our $5,000 gap year scholarship. So really great information. If you're at all interested in applying to that scholarship, I'd highly recommend that you tune in. And I promised I would circle back here. So I wanted to quickly note our $5,000 gap year scholarship. I am really enthusiastic about it, as you can tell, because we launched it today, March 1st. So I would really recommend that you start that application. It only takes 2 minutes to start. Our only requirements are that you are a US resident between the ages of 17 to 20, and that you are going to plan on taking a gap year with one of our participating gap year programs, either in summer 2022 or fall 2022. So really simple. Again, I'll be dropping a link to our page where you can apply for that scholarship. And I hope to be reading through some of your applications. All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Holly Bull, the Center for Interim Programs. Holly is an amazing gap year consultant. She has so much experience, and I am personally really excited to be able to listen to her and learn from her today. So thank you so much, Holly, and I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Claire. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for your interest in this topic. I'm Holly Bull, as Claire said. I'm president of the Center for Interim Programs. You can hop over to the next slide, Claire, thanks. And my company, the Center for Interim Programs, is the oldest independent gap year counseling organization in the United States. We started doing this work in 1980 when nobody was really talking gap year in the US. And we have at this point over 8,000 alumni with whom we've worked. Mostly students, but we actually work with all ages. But students are the ones who can more easily take this kind of time. I myself am a gap year student. I've done 2 gap years myself, one before college when my father started this company in 1980, and then one after my sophomore year in college. And at this point, I've also been doing gap year counseling for over 30 years, and I've worked with, at this point, over 3,000 students. So I've midwifed a lot of people through this process. I am the parent of 2 gap year students. My stepdaughter, Samantha, who's 28, took a gap year before college. And my daughter, Leah, who's 19, is actually on her gap year right now. So I've been, watching this process up close and personal in the face of the pandemic and all of that, not only with my regular students, but also with my daughter. And I know how challenging it can be to figure out the details around taking gap time. And I'm very happy to share a few of my top tips today at the request of the USA Gap Year Fairs and the Go Overseas team. Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so my 3 main tips here, these are really on how to use your gap year for career exploration. And this is an incredibly practical approach to taking gap time. The first tip here is a pretty basic one, but sometimes people don't think to do this. Just start with your core interests. Make a list of your general areas of interest and include any specific majors or careers that you might be thinking about. If you have these in mind, many people don't know what they want to do. And it's normal that people don't have necessarily clarity around a potential major or career. And this is precisely why gap time is so helpful, because it really allows you to stick your toe in the water of these different areas of interest and just see what you think. And students are normally doing a variety of experiences during this gap year. So you're kind of systematically picking off these interests one by one through these different experiences. To help you start with those core interests, you can harvest our interest sheet on our website. I think Claire's going to drop that into the chat for you. This does not obligate you to work with us at all. It's just use this template if you want to pick off locations in the world, areas of interest. Sometimes it's easier to run through a list and say, oh yeah, okay, do that, I could do that, I could do that. And then you can start to match hands-on options with those core interests. The second tip here is just exploring as many areas of interest as you can. Finding out what you aren't drawn to is going to be as helpful as determining what you like. And I'm a really good example of that. My first gap year, I spent about 3 months in Hawaii doing aquaculture research with an eye to maybe becoming a marine biologist. And so I was in the daily do of scrubbing out shrimp tanks and chatting with the scientists. And it took me, I think, about a month or so before I thought, I probably don't have the patience for this kind of research based on what I'm seeing and what the scientists are telling me about the work, this kind of work. So it was really helpful to know that before heading off and maybe majoring in that in college and not really knowing. Classes don't really give you a sense of what the field is like. And when you don't have access to people in the field as much. And ideally what you want to do is be able to be around them and chat with them on a daily basis and sort of grill them. It's like, what is this like? And so that you're more prepared for that field if you're going to pursue it, or you get a sense of, okay, maybe this isn't quite what I wanted to be doing. And having a wide range of experience is going to really allow you to sort of peek into all these different work environments. And you can begin to ask yourself some basic questions like, do I like this kind of work? Does the pace suit me? Are the people in this field compatible with who I am or my work style? Samantha, my stepdaughter, is a good example of this because she spent 3 months of her gap year in Ireland, in Dublin, doing an internship, working for this little Irish co-op, a startup company. It's a lot of artists. And she said at the end, she said, I really enjoyed it. I love business. They said I could run this place. It's great. She said, it was fun to work with the artists, but it was really hard to organize them because she had to, set stuff up and write blogs on them and so forth. And she found it really frustrating because she's highly organized. And so what was interesting about that, I said to her, that's what you want to know, given who you are and your work style, it gives you a feeling for, okay, what kind of work environment might I want to be in, or what works for me or not. And then the third tip here is to really consider adding a dedicated internship placement to your gap year. I never like to push options on people. If somebody's interested in an internship, though, I'm nudging hard because I think these are so incredibly practical. So the next slide will give you some pictures of the possibilities here. So there are these 2 main categories of internships. You've got the group programs that have internships, and then you have these individual internship placements. Both of these set up housing for you. You're living usually in shared apartments with fellow students. You've got a built-in social life. So it's a really nice landing pad. One is more independent than the other. I'll go into it in a little more detail in a moment. The types of internships we do really vary. I mean, it can be businesses of all kinds, technology, journalism, museums, conservation work, arts, human rights, engineering, service work as well. We have students working with refugees in cities in Africa, for example. And you're just, again, matching those interests with these possibilities that are out there, and ideally landing in a substantive work experience. Now, if you do the group internships, typically those run a semester. So fall or spring. There's one in the US and there's one in Israel. You have to be Jewish for the ones in Israel. And then the individual internships, they can run like 6 to 12 weeks. And these are in different urban locations, could be in Ireland or Spain. I have, 2 students in London right now doing tech internships and working at a music museum, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, if they open up and let us back in again. And with the group programs, you're paying some overarching fee, like $8,000 to $17,000 a semester. With the internships that are more individual placements with these internship providers, you're looking at a couple $1,000s, and then you have housing and food costs you have to cover. But they're setting up the housing, and then you have a local contact person to turn to as well if there's a problem. So sometimes I have people squawk at me, Holly, why do I have to go pay to work for someone? Well, you're young, it's a lot set up for you. It's well worth it for what you're getting. For parents, it can be really helpful to have somebody on the ground to help out if there's a problem. I had students in Africa when the pandemic hit, and the people on the ground who set up those placements for all of our students got them all home on flights. Just parents were so grateful. It's worth a lot. I mean, right now I have a young man who's in Africa doing an internship. He's got a kidney stone. And so the internship program on the ground has been taking him to the hospital. The doctor says mother is not going crazy, trying to tend to him from afar. And that's really helpful. So as I said, it's well worth landing, an embedded placement with shared housing set up for you, fellow interns for a built-in social life, and then someone to turn to if there's a problem. And with these, if you do an independent internship like this, you're basically living the way you're going to live post-college. And you can do this at 18 or 19. So it's like a half step into the working world, which is just an amazing trial run, if you will, into the working world before even college. And so aside from just career exploration, do I like this work? You're building a resume before you hit college. You're front-loading work skills that are going to probably be more useful for you in the work world post-college than most classes. And you're doing this all, through these placements. So really, really useful. Okay, the next slide here is, oh, actually, no, I just wanted to back up a minute. One more comment on these internships. So these internships really can help you get jobs down the line. So just again, using my stepdaughter as an example, Samantha said, I'm pretty sure I got my job with IBM right out of college based on that internship I did in Dublin at 19. She said, that's all we talked about during the interview. And at the end of it, they said, Samantha, you pretty much got this job because of your gap year, because of her work experience, and also how she showed up as a human being, sense of self-confidence. People pick that up about you as soon as they shake hands with you almost. So it can really help. These are down the line benefits, but the smoother transition not only to college, but also into the work world. Okay, thanks, Claire. Next slide. So this next type of program can also be really useful for figuring out potential career interests. These are the shorter skill-based intensives. So they're often 1 to 4 weeks. They can be longer, but generally shorter. And they're residential. You're living with fellow students who could be a range of ages. So you have a built-in community, and they're in the US or abroad. And these are short trainings, or you might get certifications that can range from, the wilderness EMT. There's a picture of the girl there with the simulated broken legs. That's a 4-week getting the medical skills. You might be doing shadowing of doctors and nurses in clinics and hospitals as a short intensive program if somebody's pre-med track. I had a young woman, Ellen, do this in 2017 in Thailand. She was standing at the shoulders of surgeons and she was thinking about being a surgeon. And she came home and told her parents, I don't think I'm going to be a surgeon. I will be a surgeon. You know, you want that kind of clarity if you're going to go to med school. So that was really helpful for her. Or it could be placements like, I'm going to go off and learn how to teach skiing or snowboarding or surfing or yoga. So it's not just recreational, you're actually learning how to convey information clearly. It's a skill. Or learning how to run a recording studio or filmmaking classes or, you know, cooking intensives, or it could be short writing courses or entrepreneurial workshops, or some people are, you know, pulling in coding courses. So you can tuck these into your gap time or breaks in college, and they're in a very short period of time, you're getting a lot of information fast. And again, pretty impressive stuff on that resume, the resume building. So the next slide here, this is showing you information gathered by the Gap Year Association. This is survey data on students, and this is illustrating the practical benefits of taking gap time. It also mirrors the anecdotal evidence that we've been hearing for years, just about what students get from taking gap time. So if you look here, 98% of students saying their gap year helped improve their maturity and confidence. You know, again, that's going to help you be much more proactive in moving on things in college, as well as the work world beyond. 60% saying their gap year either confirmed or helped them discover their choice of major or career. It doesn't even include the students who figured out what they didn't want to do, like me, which is also really useful. And then 82% said their gap year gave them a competitive advantage when applying to college and or jobs. And that I've again heard from students over and over again. And this mirrors data from the United Kingdom, England. The gap year has been in full swing for a long time. It's still a relatively new field in the US. And the same thing they're finding is just job satisfaction and the trainings, all of this really helps. Okay, next slide, please. This, just to give you a quick hit of what a year could look like. A sample gap year, this, you do not have to follow this blueprint, but you can see it pretty much follows a school calendar. So summer tend to be people doing their own thing, working to help pay for their gap year, like I did maybe. If you don't have to do that, I often recommend that students do, just to chip in, it's their year. And then in the fall, if students really want more of a built-in group, and after COVID and the effects of COVID, these can be really helpful, just to have a variety of experience within one group program that you're doing and the built-in social life that will fill the fall. But you don't have to start with something like that. You could do skill-based intensives in the fall. I had a young woman last fall do the WEMT for a month, and then she worked on a local squad in her hometown. But then there's a winter break, so you can see you come home, see your friends and family. This is often where sometimes people will reapply to college. So if they don't get in where they want to go or they're changing, you have that second shot at applying to college halfway through your gap year. Typically, students are applying and deferring in their senior year, and they don't have to think about it, and that's ideal. And then January through May, often what I see with students is they're really ready to move into more independent placements, and this is where they might be stepping into internships and the skill-based learning, build training programs, or volunteer or service learning type options. If you look at my daughter Leah's gap year, she started with a group outdoor program in the fall, and then now she's doing an internship with a human rights lawyer in South Africa for about 3 months, before then maybe doing some free travel at the very end in Europe to finish out her year. So it's like 2 main things during her year. And she said just the independent living skills that she's been picking up, being proactive, moving on things. She had to change her internship. She handled all of that. And again, it's just really good training. And then, college or the workforce beyond. Now, I had a young man who was really clear he didn't want to go to college. And he said, I'm interested in the recording arts. And he did just a month-long program learning how to run a recording studio. And then he worked in an internship in a recording studio in Philadelphia where he lived. And then they hired him on. So it just gave him a direct line to work that he really enjoyed, because not everybody necessarily wants to go to college. So the gap year can also give you a way to get more the skills, the training to then just move right into a job. Okay, next slide. I think we're almost done here. So, for more information, just how to find programs, you've got the USA Gap Year Fairs. Go Overseas is a really nice resource. The Gap Year Association is another one where you can take a look and just see vetted programs and get a sense of what's out there. For those of you who might have popped in later, I'm Holly Bull, and I'm an accredited gap year counselor. And so there are a number of us counselors out there who many of us will do a free brainstorming session. And we do that. And part of our mission is just to educate people about the gap year. So there's no obligation, but it can really help students pinpoint interests and see what types of options might match those and like map out a possible year scenario. Okay, so thank you very much. And now I can take questions, or Claire might throw some questions at me. Happy to answer anybody's questions now.
Thank you so much, Holly. That was wonderful, as always. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay, I love your presentations. I'm going to stop fangirling a little, but let's stop this share so we can jump into these questions. And I see that we actually already have a few in the chat. So anonymous attendee asks, where can I find a recording of this meeting? Anonymous attendee, don't even worry about that. We will be posting a recording to our YouTube channel, which I can drop again in the chat. And then you'll also receive an email with that link as well, likely tomorrow. Karen says, hi, there used to be a program called Year On, formerly college, which exposed students to a wide variety of careers. It disappeared. Is there anything out there like that now? Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I know on college, I knew the fellow who started it actually, and I don't know of anything quite like that. I think you can create a year like that where it may not give you that cohort of students for the full year while you explore these different interests, but you can still craft a year that basically does that. It just kind of allows you to try these different like job-like placements through that year with a little more support. The internships I mentioned are actually really similar to that. They're really helpful in the same way.
Oh, sorry. I think either my internet cut out, Holly, or yours did. My apologies. It was mine. It was definitely mine. So I'm sorry I missed that last bit.
I think that answered the question. And if there are any other questions that people have.
Perfect.
Some of the ones. Yeah, the Year On program is didn't last.
So Holly, I actually have a question. Oh, here we go. How common is a paid internship versus an unpaid internship?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so one of the issues with being a gap year student between high school and college is that you're not matriculated yet. So in the States in particular, companies typically have to give you money or college credit. They have to give you something. You can't get the credit because you're not in college yet, and they typically rather not pay you. So sometimes it's harder to get a paid placement or even an internship in the States, which is why we end up sending students out of country where they're paying for a placement so that it's all set up for them to have a more substantive work experience. Sometimes people have been able to get paid internships in the States, but you really have to hunt around for those on your own. I'm just telling you, they're hard. It's hard to find them. It's not impossible. The other thing you want to think about is, okay, well, where do I live? Am I home? Do I have people around for a social life? Because if a student stays home and works, whether it's a local job or an internship, it can be lonely, unless there's enough of a social life around, or they have friends they can go see. That can be harder for students. The other thing is, if you're home, you tend to regress when you're home, no matter what your age. So it's really helpful, I think, for at least part of a gap year, students are away from home and they're doing something off and away. But having said that, some people are working for part of their gap time at home and then heading out. They could do short stints out.
Great.
But definitely harder to find paid internships until you hit college. So if you're a college student taking gap time, the step-aways, as I call them, maybe taking a semester or a year away, it might be easier for you to find something that's paid, or at least get credit.
Thank you. Holly, we have a question from Sergio, and he asks, if you do an internship abroad, can you go back anytime, or do you have to tough it out?
If you do an internship abroad, usually these internships abroad run, as I said, 6 to 12 weeks. Nobody's going to force you to stay if you are having a difficult time with it. I think if you leave, you normally can't go back to it. So I'm not trying to understand the question, but just so I make sure I understand, there's a couple of different ways I can answer this. So you could go do an internship, and then if you really like it, I've had students go back and continue working with that same company. You have to pay attention to your visa, because normally gap year students are traveling as a tourist, and you have about 90 days on a tourist visa most places in the world. So if you go on if you go to Europe and do an internship in the fall, you can't actually turn right around and go in January again, because you need 3 months in between away from most of the EU before you can go back as a tourist. So people can do internships in different locations. Did that answer your question, Sergio? If you, hop on if you want to. There are not too many of us here, but not to put you on the spot, but was that what you were looking for? You have to tough it out.
I think that was a pretty comprehensive answer, Holly. I think it's
I think,
also
here's, I mean, I can say that if you get homesick or something like that. Okay. That's a good question. I think it depends on the placement. So, no, that's fine. So I have 2 students right now who are doing internships in Africa, and they talk to their bosses. They talk to their internship placement people, and they said, hey, can we do a break for 2 weeks to go do a trip that their parents had wanted to set up for them. And so they got the okay to take a break and then come back. So that's a situation where somebody was able to step away. And I think as long as you handle it professionally and it's okay with the placement people who set it up, it's okay. Generally what I find, if you're feeling homesick, unless it's really horrible, you can push through it. And it really also helps if there are other students around for company, because they're going through stuff too. So my daughter, has gone up and down with this placement doing her internship in Africa, and has the support of other people, and and you just push through, and usually it's fine. Things aren't that long. I mean, even 10 to 12 weeks, it sounds like a long time, but it actually whips by, when you're in a placement like this. So generally I find that people are able to stay. Sometimes people will step away, or they're shifting within the internship setup. Like I said, my daughter Leah started out with more of an outdoor, like urban gardening placement, but realized this doesn't have enough like business end of it. I thought I was going to be doing more of a variety of things with the business. I need to switch and start using my brain more. So she talked to the people who set it up, said, look, I'd like to change. And they said, okay, we need a little time. So she did 2 weeks there and then a week break, and then moved into work with the human rights lawyer. And just advocating for that was a really good learning experience for her. Yeah, and sometimes it takes people a while. I had a young man who did an internship on his gap year and blew it. He was in New Zealand. He just wasn't showing up. He wasn't terribly organized. Came home, his parents said, you need to go to work locally and then go to college, which he did. But then he'd circle back around to me, because our service is open-ended. So, if you work with us, you got us for life, whether you want us or not, it's an open-ended service. So Terry circled back around to me post-college, and he said, I want to do another internship. And I said, Terry, you have to nail this. I was like wagging my finger at him. But he took it in good spirit. And he said, no, I will. And so he was set up with 2 internships in California and nailed them. And one of them hired him on. So, for him, it just took him a little while. But that's the beauty of the trial run of testing yourself in the world. Or you're like, okay, I am homesick and I need to come home. So you grapple with that. And then ideally step out again, and you can do shorter increments of time. Maybe you don't hurl yourself out into the blue for 3 months. Maybe you start with a 1 monther and then kind of see how you do. So it really can be tailored to your comfort level.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a general question. If nobody else throws anything into the chat, please do, though. I know this is your time to really take advantage of this opportunity to chat with an expert gap year consultant. So throw those questions into the chat or the Q&A. We're flexible here. But if nobody has one in the meanwhile, Holly, this is going to be a really general question. So let me know if you'd like me to specify a little bit more. But do you have any kind of overarching tips for marketing your gap year in order to secure a career or a job later on?
That's a great question. I do think that sometimes people don't remember like simple things. Like if I do an internship, I really want to ask for a letter of recommendation right away, because while I'm fresh in their minds, I want them to write up how I did. Ideally, I did a good job. And that's going to be a really useful thing to have in your arsenal down the line. I think, again, just getting practice and creating a resume and adding to it, and learning how to present yourself professionally. All of these things are going to help when you really start looking at a sort of a real job down the line. There was another question there, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another question came in from Sue. Thank you, Sue. So Sue asks, is there a good way to approach potential internships on your own? For example, create your own opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, people have been able to find, use your own contacts. Sometimes people know people who are in a particular field, and then that's a way to to get in and shadow, help out. If it can't be a regular internship, just getting in there and seeing what it's like. Even if you're filing papers, doing something really basic, you're still in the atmosphere. You're going to pick up an awful lot just by being there and chatting with people in that field. So definitely pull, basically I tell people, throw everything on the table, all the contacts you have, use everything, and if you can't find something, then at that point you might say, okay, maybe it's worth it to pay for an internship provider who'll set this up for me and make sure I have that built-in social life, with fellow interns. I think that's pretty key, especially after COVID. I'm really telling people, err on the side of more community than not right now. Just keep, don't be masochistic about your gap time.
And on that note, if you do decide to go with a provider, or do you have any tips for kind of vetting a provider to make sure that they're a good fit for you?
Yeah, I mean, this, I think, where the Gap Year Association is really helpful. It was started, I don't know how many years ago, but it's been a number of years now, I think about 10 years actually, that they've been running, and they've been gathering information on programs to vet them. So they run them through an accreditation process for programs, but then also Gap Year counselors. So there are a number of us who are accredited Gap Year counselors. So we've gone through a vetting process, which means that we worked with a certain number of students. We have procedures in place for backup and support. All of that you can read about what goes into that accreditation, and that's really a nice way to start. And then just talk to people and see if if it's a good personality fit. I think it's really helpful to talk to lots of different counselors and just see how you feel. Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Karen. So one question also that I see pop up a lot too is, obviously budget and finances during a gap year is a huge topic of conversation. We've already spoken at length about finances and scholarships and funding for your gap year in our previous crash course. But do you have any insight onto kind of unforeseen costs that might pop up during gap time that students or families should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. And my daughter Leah has just commented recently on internship placements. They're not programs, so they're going to set up the internship for you. They're going to set up your housing for you, but there can be hidden costs like, I need to get every day to my internship placement. So am I taking a bus? Am I taking Uber every day? If it's in a less safe location, I need to have an Uber. I can't just walk. And so that can add a cost to a placement that you may not be aware of. And when you're looking at program options, do your own due diligence. You can grill programs. It's like, tell me these details on what are all the costs. Are there hidden costs, so that you know what you're getting into? Ask to speak with alumni. That's really helpful. If you talk to someone, like Leah, she's going to say, hey, this is what was involved in terms of eating out costs and the transportation costs, or excursions that maybe people want to do or not. You just want to look at your budget. I think it's really helpful for parents to sit down with students and say, hey, here's what we can comfortably or willing to put toward your gap year. And then the student's got a budget in mind to work with. And then look, you can do kind of like a splurge if you can swing it, and then do more low cost options. I mean, you could do a year of nothing but room and board placements, service work, like trail work in national parks with a crew of people, disaster relief work, things that give you housing and food in exchange for labor. And you're still learning skills, and you don't have to bleed financially to go and engage in those things. And they give you community. So there are a lot of low cost options out there. You need to, again, do your due diligence on them. They don't tend to show up at fairs as much. Many of them don't even know about a fair. I mean, like a chocolate farm in Costa Rica doesn't know there's a fair in the States. But it's an interesting placement potentially that people have done sort of random. So yeah, I think people often think that they have to spend a lot of money on a gap year, and you don't. You know, I think my gap year was really reasonable for my family. I paid for the airfare. My daughter's paying for all the airfare for her gap year. I had one splurge, which was the program in Greece that I did with peers, and then one that was volunteer work in Hawaii. And so that was a really reasonable year for my parents who had 2 other children in college ahead of me.
Great. Good point.
That was a long-winded answer.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And we have a great question from an anonymous attendee who asks, do you have any tips on how to manage your time during your gap year?
Manage your time during your gap year. Okay. Well, one thing that's really important, you know, I've worked with so many people, helping them set up a pretty structured and, you know, full gap year. The articles that I read where people say this wasn't a success are invariably people who haven't put thought into their year. Like one young man I just remember reading, and he ended up at home without enough to do, and he said this was not a success. That is not a typical gap year to my mind. You know, the scenario that I showed you where you're mapping out different activities through that year, that's really important to put some time and thought into making sure you have enough going on. So in terms of time during your gap year, it doesn't mean you have to fill every moment. You definitely want at least 2 main things going on, fall and spring. When you're on a placement, so if I understand this question, again, it depends on the placement. If you're on a placement where you're with lots of different people and it's structured and there's all this activity set up for you, your time management is easy because you're just engaged in this experience for 3 months. If you step into a skill-based intensive, again, you're going to be pretty busy during the day, and you might have your evenings and weekends where you have to organize your own time, but then you have other people around to do that with. Internships, same thing. Busy during the day, organizing your time, organizing your free time, which is also part of what you're learning about. The volunteer placements, they can really vary in terms of how busy you are or not. What I see is when people are doing things that they want to do, it's not difficult for them to manage their time. I mean, I have a lot of parents now saying, I have a child who has executive functioning issues, and we need to do a program that focuses on executive functioning issues. And my feeling is that, you know, how does your child do when he or she is doing something they want to do? Do they initiate it? Do they show up on time? Generally, they do. So what parents are seeing are often students in the academic setting, which students have been in for a long time. And sometimes it's not that compelling an experience anymore by senior year. When you step out of that and you're stepping into your own gap experience, ideally you're choosing something you want to do. And so you're excited about it and you're engaged in it. And that carries you through really powerfully through most of these placements in terms of just getting those skills, organizing your time. You're not even thinking, I'm getting executive functioning skills. No, you're just doing it because you want to get at this thing or you want to set up this thing. And there's all those carrots out in front of you.
Great.
So,
thank you, Talia.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't know if that was an answer. What do I think about?
Perfect. Well, we have a number of questions now here in the chat. So let's start with the one from Karen. So Karen asks if you have any thoughts on Americorps or the NCCC.
Yeah, I mean, those are really, really useful. They're more competitive, so you want to apply sooner, like City Year as well. Definitely get an application in, but it gives you a nice cohort of people. It's low cost in the States. I think those are excellent.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Then we have another question in here from Fatima, who asks, have gap year students decide to simply get a paid internship in their particular area of interest rather than an unpaid internship?
Paid job.
For a year, for example, and any advice regarding this option?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, you don't always have to go do a program during a gap year. You can, if you can find, and I've had students work local jobs and really get a lot of skills from that. They don't mind being home. It's a value. It's all a value. The main things that I say, which I think I said before, if you're home, you just want to make sure that you're not going to be too lonely, you know, so that's one thing just to think about. Who's around? Am I going to be okay being home? Or or just the fact that when people are home, they may not just step into a kind of maturity level because they're home. However, if it works for them and they find a job and they really like what they're doing, it's absolutely of value as well. And if you can find a pretty substantive job, so much the better. But I mean, for some students who haven't worked that much or haven't been able to have the time to really commit to a longer job, may have a young man who's working at Trader Joe's, really liking it and, working his way up and getting really good skills. So, and that's a nice inexpensive gap year too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a great one to be able to market later on for a future.
Yeah, like I worked. I mean, colleges now, some of them have been saying, we actually really like to see that a student has worked and not just gone off on lots of fancy programs. So, that's understandable too. It's like, show us that you've got some skin in the game.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, we might have time for another question or two, but if not, Holly, if there's no other questions, is there anything else kind of that this conversation spurred to mind that you'd like to add that you didn't have the opportunity to already? Oh, we might have one more question. We might. Yes, we do. From Ashley. If you are already accepted into college and don't want to lose the acceptance, how do you approach the university about having the spot available after the gap year?
Oh, okay. So most colleges will let you defer. Some of the state universities don't, so you may have to reapply. Wake Forest, I think, doesn't do deferrals, although last year they did. So just ask the college, like it's college by college. But in all the years I've been doing this, most of the students with whom I work are able to ask for a deferral and get it. And many colleges will say, fine, take your gap year, but don't try and garner credit during your gap year. So you could do a program that's accredited and use like 529 money for that, but don't expect to be guaranteed that transfer credit, especially if the college has said no credit. Some of them will give you some, again, it's college by college, they really vary. So it's worth it to check on that. I find that, having that, like the plan that we lay out for students, so if we map out a scenario for your year to present to the colleges when you're asking for a deferral, it helps. It's like, oh, this person has put some thought into it. It doesn't bind you to that plan, but it shows them that you're putting some thought into it.
Some foresight. Great. Thank you for asking that, Ashley. That was a good question.
Yeah.
Okay. Another one.
Yeah, if you're already in college, you can apply for leave of absence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And that's, most of the students who are taking gap time, I would say the sort of natural break is the first year between high school and college. And then the next wave are the stepaways, as I call them, who are taking a break from college, a semester or maybe a year. And then there's sort of smatterings of people after that. So a fair number of people are stepping away from college, and they might be looking for more of the career-related options like the internships or skill-based intensives or things like that, or working, before they hit the real world. How many of you parents might like to take some gap time? I don't know who's out there as parents, but usually parents want to go. I just like asking.
Yeah.
And this is something, by the way, for you parents, just aside from the practical benefit, I mean, there's so many other benefits to gap time, but it's sometimes really helpful for parents to take off the parent lens. We're always looking through this concerned parent lens with our children. And if you just say, what would I have liked to have done if I could have taken this time? Or what did I do? And I want to do some more. I think that's really helpful, because then it really allows you to understand this is what it could offer to your own child. And you can also speak to your child on that level. It's like, wow, I didn't get to do this. There are things that I might like to have explored before committing to college, and then this work. It's like, we are so on this track in this United States, we're manic, like faster is always better. And it's just not true. If you can slow down and take time to explore. And I think it's well worth it. This is not goof off time. This is not a year off, not time off. You are on. This is time on, because you have to be. You're stepping into things that are really different from what you've done before, and all the learning, that you're getting from that. And it stays with you all your life. My 2 gap years were a long time ago, and they're still vivid, and I draw on them a lot, and not just because I do this work.
Great closing words. Thank you so much, Holly, for this
You're welcome.
discussion. And thank you so much, everybody, for participating and for throwing in those really great questions.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
really appreciative of that. Really quick, the last thing that I dropped into the chat is our crash course experience survey. So this is really important for me and it's a big ask. It's a quick survey though. It'll take you a minute or two. And after completing it, you'll be automatically entered for a chance to win $250 that you can apply to your gap time or to whatever have you. And I want to know how I can better help to improve these crash courses for you. So it would mean a lot for me if you could fill that out. So thank you so much, everybody, in advance for doing that. And thank you more than anything for tuning in today. Really excited, hopefully, to see you at the crash course on Thursday and then our scholarship crash course on March 10th. So thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you so much, Holly, for joining us.
You're more than welcome.
Great night.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.